Are you tired of studying for hours and still forgetting everything that you learned? What if I told you that you're probably studying the wrong way? It's important to use scientifically proven techniques to develop systems that help you learn faster, remember longer, and recall instantly when it matters. Otherwise, all the effort you pour into studying is going to be wasted. And it's also important to not just rely on popular techniques like using Pomodoro, which is setting 20 to 25-minute study sessions with 5-minute breaks and repeating the cycle over and over again if it's not something that works for you. And hence, it's important to understand active recall, spaced repetition, and interleaving, which are techniques top students and memory experts use for efficient learning. Chapter 1: Active Recall. Science shows that recalling what you've learned without looking at it or using a reference is what helps you strengthen the connection and helps you recall the information that you have just spent time consuming. It forces your brain to actively remember what you had just read. To use active recall, it's important to focus on whatever topic that you read, and then it's important to either close the book or switch off whatever content you were consuming, and then try to actually remember what you had just learned. You can do this by trying to recite what you had learned and recording it so that you actually have proof of what you actually said from memory, or even better, to actually write it down and see how much you actually remember. Compare the resource that you use for learning with your notes and assess where the gaps are and accordingly fill it up so that you can see where the leaks in your memory were. Chapter 2: Spaced Repetition. Now, it's more than likely when you use active recall and fill in the gaps of your memory, you're more than likely to forget that information if you don't repeatedly practice it. Which is why Hermann Ebbinghaus speaks of how much information you forget in the span of a day to an entire week. And his research focuses on the amount of information that's forgotten as soon as you learn it. Which is why it's important to review that which you learn at the right time. And this is where spaced repetition comes in. Instead of just cramming the day before and just spitting out what you've learned, it's important to first structure your study program in such a way that the first day you can learn the topic, and on the subsequent day, for example, the second or the third day, it's important to do a quick recall test. Now, how do you go about recalling the information that you've learned? One of the easiest ways is to make Anki flashcards. And you can set the interval between the days in which you would like to actively recall the information at specific periods of time. Now, it's also important to notice that you aren't just memorizing information and just spitting it out on flashcards, but rather you actually understand what you've learned and you're using the flashcards as just a way to assess and reassess if the knowledge that you've committed to memory is actually still around. Chapter 3: Interleaving. Now, this is a study technique that is often overlooked because it involves interleaving information from one subject to another to build better connections. It's important to not just study for one subject for hours or days on end, but rather it's important to study related topics such that you can actually interleave or interconnect the information between subjects. In the case of medical school, if you have a topic pertaining to the cardiovascular system, it's important to spend some time learning it earlier in the day, for instance, and then spending the rest half of your day learning about the respiratory system, and finally, the later half of the day, understanding the relation between both these systems so that you're able to interleave the information and understand how these systems are connected and use this information to strengthen your knowledge base and understanding of these topics.